What's up, guys? Welcome back to another UFC prediction video. In today's video, I'm going to be giving my full card predictions for the Apex event happening this weekend, Kyoji Horiguchi versus Manel Kape. Without any further ado, we're going to go ahead and get into the first fight. First fight on the card, we got Michael Aswell versus Gaston Balanos. Now, interesting stylistic matchup. I think both of these guys have strengths that kind of play into the other opponent's weakness. Gaston Balanos, 100% like a Muay Thai stylist, doesn't have great punch selection, but in terms of just on the feet, his kicking game is pretty solid, works some solid elbows in close, but just doesn't have a lot of fight finishing ability. Only 2 wins under the UFC banner against very low level competition, Cortavius Romeus and Phillips, where he took both of those guys to a relatively competitive decision. Now, where he did lose, it was by finish. Marcus McGee, Quang Lee subbed him up. Gaston Balanos, he is not a fast twitch fighter. He's technical, but he's quite slow on the feet, doesn't have good footwork. His coordination as a whole isn't too good. He does switch stances at times, but it's not necessarily an educated stance switch in my opinion. He doesn't really set up a lot of shots with it, just because, like I said, he doesn't have good punch selection with his hands or good footwork to get in good positions to be able to land his strikes in combination with his kicks, with his elbows, because Muay Thai doesn't always necessarily translate very good to MMA, and Gaston Balanos is kind of an example of that. And of course, on the ground, he is quite easily taken advantage of. Now, Michael Aswell, on the other hand, lost to Bogdan Grad in a pure striking match, which isn't necessarily the best look. That was on the Contender Series a few years back. He was able to pick up a win against Lucas Almeida, but Lucas Almeida had a broken hand in that fight, so you kind of can't even count that. And other than that, he lost to Luke Riley, and he lost to Balaji Oki. Balaji Oki, decent level of comp, brings some things to the table that Michael Aswell does, but he's much more explosive, and it creates much more damage in his fights. The thing I don't like about Michael Aswell's game is that he's very, very limited with his offense. Does work some decent, position on the fence. He will maintain, his back to the octagon. He'll keep you on the fence pretty good. He can burn some minutes there. In terms of his striking, though, his boxing is okay. I don't really rate his defense. He does get hit a lot, especially when you start mixing things up, like Bogdan Grad did. Gets hit with a lot of body kicks, a lot of leg kicks, spinning attacks to the body, like a spinning back kick, something like that. Michael Aswell is pretty open for those attacks, and I think with Gaston Balanos' striking skill set, he's going to be live to land head kicks, spinning elbows in close when Michael Aswell goes to close the distance, because Michael Aswell definitely has better hands, but he's just a 1-2 merchant. Kind of like Sean Strickland, just 1-2, 1-2, 1-2. Doesn't have great shot selection, and you kind of know what's coming, and doesn't have a lot of power. But he did do a really good job at winning the first round against Luke Riley in his last fight, just putting a pressure on him, holding him against the fence, like I said, being in an advantageous position along the fence, burning minutes there. I think he can do that quite well here against Gaston Balanos, who has good clinch work if he's just trying to land elbows and knees, but when the takedown threat is there, kind of is inactive in the clinch, can kind of get bullied because he's not the biggest fighter either. Used to fight at 135, moved up to 145. He was supposed to fight Lee on the Olivera and Charles Olivera card. Max and Charles card. He was supposed to fight there. His opponent had to pull out. This is going to be his first fight at 145. I kind of don't like it for him here because he's a guy that can get out physicalitied. We saw that in the Marcus McGee fight. I'm going to take Michael Aswell here to win a 29-28 decision. I think his cardio is going to be better, physicality advantage along the fence, and as long as he can just continuously land the 1-2, he should be able to at least put some numbers on the board against Gaston, who doesn't have good head movement, good footwork, like I said. Gaston's going to do good with the body kicks, but it's not going to be enough. It's going to tire him out. Give me Aswell by decision here, 29-28. All right, next fight on the card, we have Mitch Raposo versus Alan Nascimento. I'm a fan of Alan Nascimento's style. Pretty decent Muay Thai on the feet. Tends to get backed up a lot, but his shot selection isn't terrible. Good front kicks up the middle, decent straight shots. He'll dig a couple calf kicks. But the name of the game for Alan Nascimento is his beautiful submission game. That last fight that he had against Cody Durden, where he dropped him with the elbow and wrapped up a Darce choke, was one of the most beautiful finishes of last year. And like I said, his jiu-jitsu is very, very good. If you let him take your back, he's normally going to ride that out for the entirety of the round. If he does get a takedown, his takedowns aren't great, but if he does get a takedown, he'll be very quick to pass from, your closed guard. He'll get inside control. He'll pass to mount. Jiu-jitsu is very, very good for Alan Nascimento. Raposo, on the other hand, MMA generalist, American fighter, good at everything but master of none for sure. But he does put on a good pace. You look at his fight versus Andre Lima a couple years back, and Andre Lima is a fighter that I rate very highly. We'll get on to him later. But that was a relatively close fight. He was in there making it competitive, and I really like his last win against Azat Maxim. Pushes a pace, and he's just an absolute dog in there. Like I said, he's not super technical anywhere, but he's going to put a pace on you. He's going to put a lot of volume out there. And when you look at Alan Nascimento's fight versus Cody Durden, he was losing the minutes up until the finish. I think that Raposo is going to be live here if he can keep the fight on the feet. But I just feel at some point, Raposo, he's not a dumb fighter, but he doesn't always make good fight IQ choices. I could see him, maybe hurting Alan Nascimento to the body and then shooting a takedown or something like that. I think that at some point, Raposo is just going to make a bad decision. And when you make a bad decision against a guy like Alan Nascimento, who has such great positional jiu-jitsu, that can cost you rounds really quickly, especially in a 3-round fight. I don't see Raposo really damaging Alan Nascimento a lot here. He's not a guy that really has a lot of power or dangerous shot selection with elbows and knees, head kicks, anything like that. I think he's going to be doing good just throwing 1-2s, maybe ripping the body a little bit when Alan Nascimento uses the high guard, which he does a lot. Because Alan Nascimento doesn't have good head movement, just kind of stands there with the high guard. He will get backed up a little bit. He'll look to counter with a hard right hand or a hard elbow. And I think at times that's going to work for him because Raposo, if he does get his offense off, is a guy that, he's not like Max Holloway. I know this is crazy to compare the two, but Max Holloway, he'll do his work. He'll get out of the pocket. Raposo kind of admires his shots a little bit. He'll land a right hand and be like, ooh, and then he'll get, a jab to the face in return. But I think that Alan Nascimento, using his UFC experience, he's beaten decent guys, Jake Hadley, Fialho, Cody Durden. These are decent wins. Now, don't get me wrong, it's a harder stylistic matchup in this one, but I think that his grappling edge is going to be huge for him here. I think even if he's getting tagged up on the feet a little bit, he'll be able to just push the envelope and even get a standing back take if he needs it. Think of Charles Oliveira versus Dustin Poirier. I could see the fight going something similar to that, but I'm going to pick Alan Nascimento here. 29-28 decision. I think he'll drop the first round, maybe the second round, but I think that, like I said, eventually in this fight, Raposo is going to make a decision that's going to cost him a position on the ground. He gets his back taken along the fence, standing back take, something like this. That's going to be able to swing the fight for Alan Nascimento. In my opinion, I think he's going to do enough at range on the feet to keep it competitive. So yeah, give me Alan Nascimento here, 29-28 decision. All right, next fight on the card, another flyweight matchup. We have Kevin Borjas versus Andre Lima. I'm going to take Andre Lima here by 3rd round TKO. I rate Andre Lima's game very highly. I think his ground game is making improvements on a fight-to-fight basis, and his performance last time out against Daniel Perez was an absolute thing of beauty. His shot selection, mixing up his targets with calf kicks, elbows, knees up the middle, body shots. His striking selection and technique is very, very high level. Beautiful body kicks out of both stances. Decent fight IQ, he makes good decisions on a fight-to-fight basis. And who was that guy he beat a little while ago? Felipe Dos Santos. That's a solid win, and you saw him display a lot of advantageous grappling in that fight, getting a good amount of takedowns. His cardio is solid. And Kevin Borjas, he's a guy that's 4-1 in the UFC. Don't get me wrong, high level of competition that he has lost to Joshua Van, Suma Durji, last time out Emmanuel Rodriguez, who's an absolute killer. But, he was able to beat Ronaldo Rodriguez a while back. Kevin Borjas is just kind of the opposite of Andre Lima. He's pretty much a pure boxer in MMA. Got finished with calf kicks a while back versus Alessandro Costa. And I think that Andre Lima has absolutely nasty calf kicks. He's going to be able to attack that quite often because Borjas not a guy that switches stances very often, heavy on the lead leg, boxer style. And don't get me wrong, Borjas, great 1-2, pretty solid right uppercut, but doesn't throw in combinations super well, especially against taller opponents. And I don't think he's just going to be able to spam 1-2s here against Andre Lima and have much success. I think it looks similar to the Emmanuel Rodriguez fight where, to give credit to Borjas, he did land a good knockdown in that fight. And like I said, I mean, he has good boxing for sure, but that's just not enough at the highest level in the flyweight division. Andre Lima is the highest level in the flyweight division. Shot selection, wrestling advantage, does more damage with his elbows, knees, head kicks, things like this. That's going to be able to swing the momentum heavily in his favor. And I just like the momentum on his side. I think he's the more well-rounded fighter, very put together, techniques on point, and I think he's just going to be able to take advantage of the one-dimensional game that Kevin Borjas brings to the table. Borjas doesn't fight well off the back foot. I do see him getting pressured here in this fight. Andre Lima does a very good job in a similar way to Pereira. Like, his stance makes him seem bigger than he is. He has a bigger presence than he, truly, has physically, just because of the way he stands. Fights a little bit like Alex Pereira with the hands low, but his head movement's pretty solid. He has good eyes. I think he's going to be able to avoid the boxing offense of Borjas. Keep the center of the octagon, pick him apart at range. Eventually, third round, he's going to be able to put a little bit more pressure on him, start digging calf kicks, elbows up the middle. And once he gets Borjas along the fence side, like he did Daniel Perez, I think it's going to be curtains. So give me Andre Lima, third round TKO, knee up the middle. Next fight on the card, Vinicius Olivera versus Andre Fili. I mean, don't get me wrong, I kind of understand why Vinicius is a favorite here, but why on earth is he almost a 3-1 favorite? Fili plus 250, I don't understand this line whatsoever. I'm going to pick Andre Fili to win this fight. He's impressed me a lot in his last two performances. Fili's a guy that I've never really been super high on, but like I said, he has been truly phenomenal in his last two fights. Even though he lost to Jose Delgado, put up an absolute scrap there, dropped him badly in the first round, outboxed him. It was kind of just the little bit of extra output with the head kicks and the body kicks from Jose Delgado in the third round that made him swing that fight in his favor, split decision, very close fight. And Andre Fili also beat Christian Rodriguez the time before that, and he looked pretty good in that fight. Excuse me. But, he's taking on Vinicius Olivera here. Vinicius Olivera is a guy that brings some intangibles to the table, but he's not a guy that I rate whatsoever. I don't like his game. Very sloppy on the feet, swinging nasty, like just telegraphed fucking hooks. That works against like a Ricky Simone when Ricky Simone's gassed and hurt with body shots. And it works against a known gasser in Kyler Phillips. But when you get in there against an experienced fighter who doesn't get tired of Mario Bautista, it's going to be curtains. He has a lot of holes in his game that can be exploited. And when he's fighting somebody that doesn't gas out, he's going to have problems because he's kind of a cardio merchant, a pressure merchant. His overall game, like fight IQ, grappling, defense for sure, is just all piss poor in my opinion. Relies 100% on his physicality and power. He has good, big, blasting body kicks. He will fight out of both stances. And like I said, in terms of his punch selection and boxing, just big wing and hooks 90% of the time, kind of chasing it down. He can out-grapple you if you're completely gassed. Saeed Nurmagomedov comes to mind. Kyler Phillips comes to mind. But these guys do not have the cardio of an Andre Fili. You see Mario Bautista last time out just absolutely schooled him. And I know that he was injured or whatnot in that fight, but that just shows to me that he's a stupid fighter. Why would you go into a fight with a broken hand? Like, it just doesn't make any sense. I don't care how bad you need the money. You know you're going to lose. But, yeah, I mean, Vinicius Olivera, marauder, low fight IQ, bad decision-making. And Andre Fili is a crafty vet. Andre Fili, really good straight shots down the pipe. Trains at Team Alpha Male. He has for a very long time. Very well coached. Doesn't make bad decisions during his fights. And he has power in his hands. Like I said, dropped Jose Delgado last time out. Was able to beat Ceerod, who I think is a much more put-together fighter than a Vinicius Olivera. And Fili, he's always been a pretty durable guy. Unless it's like a big clubbing overhand from Dan Ige, you don't really see Andre Fili get hurt that often. And, I think that Andre Fili here is going to be able to squeak out another, split decision type of fight where he overperforms against a younger fighter that a lot of people think is a lot better than him. I mean, that's what the betting line shows me at least. And I think Andre Fili is going to win a split decision here, 29-28, of course. I just really don't like Vinicius Olivera's game. I think it leaves a lot of room to lose rounds if he doesn't get a finish. knocked down by Kyler Phillips badly with the right hand in the first round of their fight. He dropped that round. And Kyler Phillips would have won that fight if he didn't completely gas out. And I think that Andre Fili is going to be able to land counter right hands like Vinicius got dropped by Kyler with, like he dropped Jose Delgado with. I think that shot's going to be there for him because, like I said, Olivera hands down, wading into the pocket like an idiot. Looks like he's swimming out there. Give me Andre Fili. Give me the more technical, experienced fighter to win a split decision here in this fight. All right, next fight on the card, we have Magomedov versus Baghdasaryan. Pretty decent fight here. I'm actually looking forward to this one. Magomedov, not a lot of sample size to really go off of with him. Was able to beat Zercher, which was a pretty good win, and he displayed powerful striking technique in that fight on the Contender Series, and definitely a solid athlete. Just from, his style and his presence in the octagon, I think that he's going to do pretty well against stylistic matchups like that, like Zercher. But I don't think that Zercher is nearly as clean of a striker as Baghdasaryan. Baghdasaryan's actually very high level on the feet. I think Baghdasaryan's a little bit underrated, actually, because he was doing decent in the minutes and, the exchanges against Gene Silva, who we know Gene Silva's a championship caliber fighter. And other than that, got subbed by Josh Cutelaba, but he's won all of his other UFC fights. Now, don't get me wrong, low level of competition. I think Shane Young might have even been one of them, looking back on it. But Magomedov's going to have a power advantage. Baghdasaryan's kind of a pillow puncher, almost like a Soviet kickboxing style. Doesn't really sit down on his punches very much. Very in and out, fluid movement. Nice snappy kicks, side kicks to the body are there for him. Spinning back kicks to the body. I really do like his kick selection here. I think that he can maybe take advantage of Magomedov getting a little bit over aggressive and getting out of position. I could see some exchanges where Magomedov is chasing him with big hooks. Baghdasaryan is just kind of getting his head off the center line, pivoting out, landing a nice body kick, getting back in space. But overall, I'm actually going to pick Baghdasaryan here by decision. I like his UFC experience. I think he's going to be better over the course of 15 minutes. If it's not like a plotty, front-footed fighter that is just kind of a well-rounded threat like Zercher is, I think that Magomedov's going to have a little bit of trouble if he's fighting like a really elusive striker. I think that, a boxer-wrestler type is much more of an easy stylistic matchup for Magomedov, considering his skill set, power striker, decent overall. But I think that Baghdasaryan, unless Magomedov displays, really good cage control and ring generalship in this fight to be able to block off any type of, exits or counters that Baghdasaryan's going to go for after exchanges, I think Baghdasaryan's going to do good at just pop shotting him, getting back at range with the kicks, throwing some 1-2s just to, get numbers on the board, faking teeps to be able to just control the distance between them, lots of front kicks up the middle. So yeah, I'm going to take Baghdasaryan here by decision in this fight, underdog pick. All right, our next fight on the card, we have Ceerod versus Amil. I'm going to be completely blunt. I've never correctly predicted a Christian Rodriguez fight. I am absolutely horrible at picking his fights. I picked Cameron Simon over him. I picked Isaac Dolgarian over him. I picked him to beat Julian Erosa. I picked him to beat Mel Costa. I picked him to beat Andre Fili. And I picked Austin Bashi to beat Ceerod. So don't bet on this fight considering my pick, because I am horrible at calling Ceerod fights for some reason. Amil, his style is definitely just absolute marauder. Pretty solid boxing in the pocket. He will pressure you a lot. He had a lot of success with that against William Gomis, and he really impressed me in that performance. You look at his 2 fights before that, absolute cinema. The Lee fight, just scrapping in the pocket. He threw like 40 significant strikes in like 30 seconds in that fight. They just went to war, and Amil got the better of it. Amil in a firefight is definitely where he thrives. If it's a clean kickboxing fight on the outside against a lanky opponent, he was able to bring Gomis into more of a brawl and cut off the cage pretty effectively in that fight. But you look at his fight versus Jose Delgado, you look at his fight versus Jamal Emmers last time out, 2 lanky strikers, lots of kicks coming back at him. He didn't do too good in those fights. But if you know ball if you know ball, you know that Fernie Garcia versus Hyder Amil was an absolute banger as well. What you know about Fernie Garcia? But I'm actually going to take Hyder Amil to win this fight because Christian Rodriguez, he's a guy that is very well-rounded, and I actually think he's quite high level in every area of MMA. Like, his striking is solid, outstruck Austin Bashi clean, and Austin Bashi's a good striker. He outstruck Austin Bashi easy, 1-2, dig to the body, knee up the middle. He's a high fight IQ fighter for the most part, but sometimes he just has moments where he just does not look good. Andre Fili, he's eating 1-2s down the pipe, just sticking his head in a guillotine versus Julian Erosa. I will, to this day, always say that I think Ceerod versus Isaac Dulgarian was one of the most, it was just a completely corrupt, rigged fight. Isaac Dulgarian won that shit clearly. I don't know how on earth they gave that shit to Ceerod. Completely rigged fight. We know that Isaac Dulgarian, he's compromised when it comes to that. We saw what he did versus Yair Deville, but that's besides the point. Got taken down a lot by Isaac Dulgarian. Ceerod's interesting because he's just so hit or miss. Like, against Mel Costa, he was foot sweeping him all over the place, trying to, grapple advantageously. Did pretty decent on the feet there. Went for the grappling a lot versus Andre Fili, which was also a very close fight, but I thought that if he kind of made that more of a dog fight, he would have had a little bit more success. He didn't really get his game going until the later part of that fight. He kind of waited too long trying to be technical at range. Because sometimes he'll be really smart and sometimes he's really dumb. Ceerod's just a guy I just don't have a good read on. So in this fight, I think that Hyder Amil is going to be able to push the envelope a little bit, make it a scrap like he did versus Fernie Garcia, like he did against Lee. And I think that Ceerod, if he doesn't go for the wrestling here, which Ceerod definitely does his best work in terms of grappling when he has double unders against the fence. He'll work foot sweeps. He'll change levels to a high cross, stuff like this. He's not really a guy that will shoot a clean single or double out in the middle of the cage, but I think that he's not going to be able to wrestle Hyder Amil here very effectively because they're going to be similar sizes. And I think Hyder Amil is actually going to have a physicality advantage. Hyder Amil is a junkyard dog as well, very durable. Christian Rodriguez does not hit hard whatsoever. I feel like you got to be a Delgado with a nasty knee up the middle, or Jamal Emmers with some nasty switch head kicks to really get respect from Hyder Amil. Dude, Fernie Garcia, bro. What a G. But I think Hyder Amil is going to be able to make this a scrap with Christian Rodriguez. He's not going to allow Christian Rodriguez to make it like a slow, methodical fight where there's a lot of fence work, a lot of fighting at range. I think these two are going to be in the pocket scrapping for a round and a half, and I think that second round, Hyder Amil is going to clip him. So I think Hyder Amil is going to win this fight by second round TKO over Christian Rodriguez. Yeah, I think he has a massive power advantage. I think he's going to be able to dictate the pace of play in this fight. Ceerod tends to fight to his opponent's strengths as well most of the time, which is just not good decision making on a certain level. So yeah, give me Hyder Amil, second round TKO here. All right, our next fight on the card, we have Navajo Stirling versus Ion Cutelaba. Two very, very different fighters. Navajo Stirling just got into the UFC about 2 years ago, and he's fought very similar stylistic matchups every single time, and also very similar stylistic matchups to how Ion Cutelaba fights. And I actually really like that for Navajo Stirling going into this fight. I don't have my notes or my computer or anything like that with me here, but I'm going to try to remember, like Tuco Tokos, he beat Ivan Urslan, he beat Rodolfo Bellato, I think, last time out, and Bruno Lopez. Yeah, so big, physical, strong heavyweights that are going to try to push you against the fence, maybe try to level change on you, work the body a lot. And this is things that Ion Cutelaba brings to the table. But Ion Cutelaba, he's a guy that is underrated, I'd say, still, because very long UFC career. You got a lot of sample size. You got a lot of wins, a lot of losses. He's always been a 50-50 guy, but, he's a very experienced fighter, and he does tend to pull up as an underdog and win sometimes. You think about his win last time out versus Omar Sy, and it was like a pick'em with him and Ivan Urslan. He pretty much dominated that fight. He's came through as an underdog a time or two and, beaten some pretty solid fighters, in my opinion. And Oh, dude, who did he submit with the arm triangle? Ibo Aslan. I mean, Ibo Aslan isn't super high level, but he displayed like better fight IQ than he had in the past in that Ibo Aslan fight on Cutelaba, that is, because it started out as a scrap, you know, which favors Aslan. Ibo has always been a guy that's been super, super aggressive. You think about his fights versus Magomedov and Goliath back in the day, just marauding forward like an idiot, running into counter shots, getting stained, just poor decision making. But then sometimes it works for him, like when he fights Khalil Roundtree, absolutely ran through Khalil Roundtree like he didn't even exist. Like overhand right, double leg, ground and pound TKO easy in the first round. Ion Cutelaba, like I said, very 50-50 guy. He can be taken advantage of when he fights stupid, but when he fights smart, when he mixes in his takedowns, when he goes for a submission game, when he doesn't overexert himself and just uses clean boxing on the feet, he hits hard. I think he could have arguably given... Did he beat Modestus Bukauskas, or did Bukauskas get that decision? I think Bukauskas actually got that decision. You could have given that fight to Ibo Aslan. Now, Ibo Aslan, fucking Ion Cutelaba, dude. These guys' names, bro. But Ion Cutelaba, if he is able to pressure Navajo Stirling here against the fence and, you know, work his submission game, if he can get him down to the ground, I think Navajo Stirling's going to have major issues there, because against Rodolfo Bellato, Navajo Stirling was wrestling a lot in that fight, which really surprised me. I mean, don't get me wrong, I like to see the development in his game, but dude, I need to see him knock somebody out in the UFC before I really think he's going to take it far. Because, you know, Navajo Stirling, we know the deal with him. City kickboxing style, a lot of rear hip feints, a lot of pump faking the jab, good check hook on him, good calf kicks, good shots to the body, you know, good straight shot selection. Very clean striker. We know how these city kickboxing guys operate. They all fight with very good kickboxing fundamentals. He'll work some solid knees in as well when he's against the fence. Pretty good knee up the middle for him. He has good knees up the middle. I don't know what the fuck I'm saying right now. I'm pretty tired. But look, Navajo Stirling, he's obviously going to have the long-rangey striking advantage here. But these city kickboxing guys struggle when it becomes a bit of a scrap. Jan Blachowicz, Israel Adesanya, Pantoja, Kai Kara-France. I know these are championship caliber fights, but you know, when you dial the level back a little bit, I think Ion Cutelaba can bring a lot of things to the table that really give Navajo some issues. Because I think Ion Cutelaba may hit harder naturally. I think he is more of a brute. And I think that his forward pressure, the threat of the level change, him just being unpredictable and weird, you know, with these clean kickboxers, it's honestly easier for them to fight somebody that's going to be technical along with them rather than someone who's just going to be, you know, giving them a lot of weird looks, kind of overriding their nervous system. It's hard to get a good clean counter shot on them because they're switching stances, they're all over the place, they're shooting takedowns. Like, it's really hard to get a clean read on a guy like Ion Cutelaba. That could give Navajo Stirling a lot of issues. I'm actually picking Ion Cutelaba here. I'm going to pick Ion Cutelaba. I think that he's going to be able to make it a scrap like he kind of did versus Ibo Aslan. And then I think he's going to be able to get the grappling and the submission game going. I really do. I think he's going to know that that's his path to victory. Don't get me wrong, Navajo Stirling has proven to have solid grappling, but I actually think Ion Cutelaba is like very good on the ground. He had advantageous position over Ivan Urslan, subbed Omar C, subbed Ibo Aslan. Like, I think he's going to be able to get a submission in this fight. So I'm going to call Ibo Aslan. Ibo Aslan, fuck. I'm sorry, I keep mixing these guys' names up. Ion Cutelaba by second round submission is the pick. Okay? Ion Cutelaba by second round sub. That's what we're going with. All right, we move on to the main event of the evening. Manel Kape versus Kyoji Horiguchi. Two of the fastest fighters on the roster. Arguably the two fastest fighters on the roster. So don't blink during this fight or you might miss something. Both of these guys are very dynamic strikers in different ways. Kyoji Horiguchi, very light on his feet, in and out movement, nice like Japanese style calf kicks. He'll mix that, you know, little stabbing front kick up the middle in there every now and then. Awesome high kick setups as well. You know, he rhythm steps a lot, which isn't something I particularly like, but he'll do that a couple times, and then, you know, most UFC fighters aren't high level enough to actually recognize that, and he'll do that a couple times, you know, rhythm step, feint, and he's so good at being at like a range where you think he's completely out of range and just like completely even out of kicking distance. and then he leaps in with a nasty body kick or a nasty high kick, and he snipes you. And that's how he knocked out Tagir Ulanbekov. And honestly, I think my worst UFC prediction ever was picking Tagir to beat Kyoji. Because I was just like, well, you know, Dagestani wrestling. But that was a casual pick, straight up. And I'm not a casual. But Kyoji Horiguchi has really been impressive in his first 2 UFC fights back. Of course, we can't forget, way back in the day, gave Demetrius Johnson a solid fight, had some very high-level exchanges with DJ, who's one of the GOATs for sure. And, I mean, I've even honestly underrated DJ's resume, but Kyoji Horiguchi, very, very good title fight performance versus Demetrius Johnson. And, of course, let's not forget that Kyoji did beat Manel Kape back in the day when they fought in Rizin, but I mean, that's even less relevant than, like, McGregor versus Holloway back in the day, because Rizin, that shit's in a ring. This was, like, 10 years ago. Kyoji Horiguchi was able to sub him up, but, you know, the ring, Kape was slipping all over the place and shit. I think that Manel Kape has made so much just improvements in many different aspects of his game, even since he's been in the UFC. You know, early UFC career, lost to Pantoja, no shame there. Lost to Mateus Nicolau. Not the best performance, but he was just kind of low output there. Mateus Nicolau was always good. Don't forget about Mateus Nicolau. But, you know, Manel Kape, ever since then, he's been on a tear. And I have really, absolutely loved his last 2 performances against Asu Amabayev, or last 3 performances, may I say. Bruno Silva, Asu Amabayev, and Brandon Royval. Manel Kape is the best fighter in the flyweight division if he's performing at that level, and I've been on record saying this. I think the only person that can maybe beat Manel would be Lerner in a 3-round fight, just because I rate Lerner's striking that highly. But Manel Kape, he beats everybody in the division. I swear to God, I'm picking Manel Kape here by TKO. So let me tell you why. Manel Kape is not only the fastest fighter on the roster, he has some of the nastiest knockout power and striking selection in the entirety of the flyweight division. Now, don't get me wrong, Gooch is pretty solid. He's got his nice little 1-2 head kick, good straight shots. He has a nice little long left hook that he'll use at range to pivot out. So it's very hard to really corner or cut off the cage Kyoji Horiguchi when he's really, you know, really fast and fresh in the early part of this fight. Or in the early part of his fights. But this is his first 5-rounder in a while. Let's not act like he's not getting up there in age. And this isn't Justin Gaethje in the lightweight division. This is flyweight. And Manel Kape is entering his prime. He's roided to the teeth. Dude, look at Manel Kape's last 3 fights compared to his early UFC career. This dude's moving like Izzy in 2020. He's got the gyno. Manel Kape, I think, is legit juicing heavy. He's on that good shit, because he's been hitting harder, he's been faster, and these aren't just technical improvements. Like, something changed physically with Manel Kape, and that's one of the reasons why I think that currently he is the best fighter in the flyweight division. Let's keep it a buck. Most UFC fighters are juicing. Let's just be honest and mature about this shit. Most of these guys are juicing at the highest level in the rankings. But I think that Manel Kape is juiced to the teeth. I think that he's going to hit so much harder than Kyoji Horiguchi. I think Kyoji's going to do decent landing his jab. I think his 1-2 is going to be good for him, because Manel Kape, the one thing I will say that I don't love about his striking is that at times when he's on his pressure, he does, you know, get tagged with the jab every now and then he'll try to counter. You know, you kind of saw Royval have a little bit of success with that. I will say, though, that I don't think that Kyoji Horiguchi's kicking game is at all going to be a factor in this fight, because Manel Kape has excellent kick defense and kick counters. You try to land a low kick on him, he'll switch stances, he'll land his own calf kick. You try to body kick him, he's sweeping that shit, getting you off balance, and he's coming back with a nasty left hook to the body or overhand straight to the chin. Very, very good at countering kicks. I could see him, you know, catching a kick, countering Kyoji Horiguchi hard and hurting him, maybe cutting him. And I think that also, something that I love from Manel Kape, his fundamentals from both stances are very, very good. You know, people glaze the fuck out of Alex Pereira. This dude can't throw a jab or a low kick effectively from southpaw. How are you the best striker in the UFC if you can't throw a jab and a low kick effectively from southpaw, from your non-dominant stance? Dude, Manel Kape is so fucking good at throwing jabs into a low kick from southpaw and orthodox. And this helps him cut off the cage very, very well against these elusive type of fighters. Like Brandon Royval, for example. This is how he set up his KO versus Brandon Royval. Every time Royval would try to circle to his right, Manel Kape would open his stance, jab, low kick, or, left hook, low kick, moving back to the right, instantly back in orthodox. He'll dig a right hook to the body, another calf kick when Royval switches back to orthodox. Manel Kape is a very high-level operator when it comes to fighting out of both stances and breaking his opponent's base to be able to corner him and land his combinations, which are just nasty. The way he knocked out Bruno Silva was disgusting. He was piecing Asu Amabayev the fuck up. And I know I poked him a lot and nutshotted him a lot in that fight, but Manel Kape has looked unstoppable recently. And I think that he's going to be able to jab and low kick Kyoji Horiguchi's legs very, very effectively in this fight. Because Kyoji Horiguchi, he's good at defending one strike. Because he's got that, bouncy base. His hands are low. He'll dodge one strike. But when you start putting 3-4 piece combinations together, 2-3-2 low kick from Manel Kape, that's going to land. And it's going to be effective. And don't get me wrong, I think Kyoji Horiguchi does have good stamina. But you cannot fight that super bouncy and elusive effectively for 5 rounds when you're in there with someone as good as Manel Kape. You even saw him getting a little bit tired at the end of his 3-round fight with Amir Albazi. And I think that his style, relying so much on super fast, bouncy footwork, super explosive maneuvers, I think that with his age in the flyweight division, it's going to be a 5-round fight. I think it's going to be hard to really fight effectively that way against Manel Kape because, like I said, Manel Kape, nasty, nasty calf kicks, really good inside leg kicks as well. I think that Manel is going to be able to break down Kyoji Horiguchi's base. And if you take away Kyoji's footwork and it's just going to be kind of like a fight in the 50-50 position, dude, Manel Kape's going to absolutely smoke him because Manel Kape, way more power in his hands. He digs body shots way more effectively. I think his knees and elbows in close are going to be a huge factor. Don't get me wrong, Kyoji's solid with the shot selection, but it's 1-2s, it's high kicks, it's, mainly right-sided attacks. And other than the jab, dude, Manel can throw anything from either stance. He's insanely high level. Other than getting hit with jabs kind of often when he pressures, when he does start with his combinations in the finishing sequence versus Brandon Royval, in the finishing sequence versus Bruno Silva, his head movement and ability to pull counter, slip, dip, and rip, dude, absolutely disgusting. Give me Manel Kape here, 2nd round TKO. I think he's going to hit him in a similar fashion to how he got Brandon Moreno out of there. Brandon Moreno, fuck, dude, what am I saying in these videos, dude? In the same fashion to how he got Brandon Royval out of there, I think Manel Kape's going to knock out Kyoji like that. So, hope you guys enjoyed the video. Leave a like, comment, subscribe if you did. That means a lot to me, and enjoy the card this weekend.